Roll Credits, the podcast for movie and TV lovers who can't get enough trivia. Today, we're flipping the lights to flicker mode and heading to Hawkins, Indiana, for a dive into Stranger Things Season 1. From Demogorgons to Eggo waffles, we're breaking down each episode with fun facts, behind-the-scenes stories, and all the nostalgic 80s vibes you could ask for. Our mission today is to really unpack the sources you've shared with us on that pivotal first season. We want to pull out all the key details, facts, and, surprising insights that make it tick.
Yeah, it really did capture lightning in a bottle, didn't it? And going through these sources, you see just how much thought went into it. It wasn't like an accident. Every little piece, from the basic idea to the music, was super deliberate.
Okay, let's start right at the beginning then. This whole huge thing came from the Duffer Brothers. What was the initial spark like? Where did Stranger Things even come from?
Well, the very first concept laid out in their pitch Bible is actually called Montauk. They pictured it set in Montauk, Long Island, back in 1980. And what's really interesting is their core idea. They were deliberately trying to mix that intense, maybe morally gray search for a missing kid, think the film Prisoners, but blend it with childlike sensibilities.
Huh. So that gritty adult desperation side by side with the kid's perspective, the wonder and the fear, that feels specific. How did they think that would work?
Right. It's not your usual combo. They basically paired that emotional core with the classic horror idea of a monster that, eats people.
Yeah.
But to ground the monster bit, they looked at history specifically, the Cold War and all those stories about bizarre experiments like Project MKUltra. Using that historical paranoia wasn't just like a potential sciencey reason for the weird stuff. It helped them fix the year, 1983. It put the story right when that Cold War anxiety was really hitting pop culture hard.
1983. Just before things like Red Dawn really cemented that fear in everyone's minds. That makes a lot of sense. And looking at the influences they listed, wow, it's quite a list. Did the sources talk about which ones were maybe the most important or even tough to blend?
Well, the range is pretty amazing. You've got Stephen King novels, films by Spielberg, Carpenter, Craven, Zemeckis, Lucas, Del Toro. It goes on. Specific ones mentioned are Alien for, like, the creature stuff, and Stand By Me for that group of kids having an adventure. They even pulled from anime like Akira and Elfen Lied and video games like Silent Hill and The Last of Us. The tricky part, it seems, wasn't just name-dropping these things. It was weaving them into something that felt familiar but also, fresh. They weren't just making a tribute. They were building something new from the pieces they love.
Yeah, it definitely feels like more than just ticking off reference boxes. And the structure, that was deliberate too, wasn't it? 8 episodes on Netflix, which was kind of new back then.
Absolutely. They were really clear that a standard, 22-episode TV season just wouldn't work for the sort of cinematic story they wanted. 8 episodes let them keep the pace tight, more like a long movie, and crucially, give real time to the characters. They aimed for it to feel like a big movie with a proper beginning, middle, and end for season 1, but they cleverly left just enough questions, hints of a bigger mythology, hanging to set up more seasons, which, well, obviously worked out pretty well for them.
Totally worked out. And a huge part of making that movie-like Storyland was the cast, right? Especially the kids, they carry so much early on.
Oh, the casting sounds like it was massive.
Yeah.
Carmen Cuba, the casting director, she led this huge search, auditioned 906 boys and 307 girls for those kid roles.
Wow, 900 boys. That's a lot of auditions. Any cool stories from the sources about how they found them? Any standouts?
Yeah, a couple really jumped out. Finn Wolfhard, who plays Mike, he actually auditioned when he was sick in bed. But apparently, even so, the casting folks were just blown away by his energy and how he just got the character, that sort of leader vibe. And Millie Bobby Brown, 11, her audition involved doing a really emotional scene from episode 3, and the sources say it just left this incredibly powerful mark.
You can totally feel that in their performances. What about the adults? Winona Ryder and David Harbour, they seem so essential now.
Well, for Winona Ryder as Joyce, the Duffers called her performance fearless. They specifically mentioned how she could just hold the screen, especially early on when she's often alone, dealing with all this crazy stuff. And David Harbour, as Hopper, they saw him as this great character actor who was ready for a lead role. He apparently felt the part had echoes of those classic, old-school Hollywood heroes. He even mentioned Indiana Jones, and one of his early requests was apparently that Hopper should almost always wear a hat.
The hat. That's such a perfect detail. It visually grounds him immediately. And it's interesting, the sources said they tasked so early that the actors actually influenced the later scripts.
Yeah, that's a really key point. They had the main kids cast right after the first script was done. So their individual takes, their chemistry together, that got written into the later episodes. Matthew Modine, too, as Dr. Brenner, apparently gave a lot of input on his character.
Mm.
The Duffers found him tricky to write initially because he's not in it that much, but he needed to feel like this big looming presence.
Right, right. Okay, switching gears to the world itself, Hawkins and the Upside Down. The first idea was Long Island, Montauk, but they ended up filming in Georgia. Why the change, and how'd they build that instantly familiar small-town vibe?
The sources confirm they did scout Montauk, yeah, but filming there in November 2015. Well, it presented some practical issues, mainly how cold it would be. So they found these places outside Atlanta, Georgia, and towns like Douglasville, Jackson, Stockbridge that actually reminded them of their own childhoods in North Carolina, surprisingly. The goal was to find a setting that felt instantly familiar, like it could be almost any town in the United States, and didn't need much dressing up to look like the late 70s or early 80s. Just create this universal nostalgic backdrop.
And within that town, some locations are almost characters themselves.
Yeah.
How did they design places like the lab or Will's house?
Hawkins' lab was meant to feel cold, imposing, like this physical symbol of that Reagan-era paranoia and Cold War anxiety we mentioned. It just looms there. Will Byers' house, interestingly, was designed starting with Joyce herself. Her emotional state, her background, her money situation. The Christmas lights, which become this huge communication device that was deliberate. There's something Joyce, struggling with jobs, could barely afford. It turns this simple decoration into this vital plot thing born out of desperation and hope.
The lights is communication. That's one of the most iconic visuals from the whole season, easily. And then there's the Upside Down. How did they bring that creepy parallel world to life?
That was apparently the most creatively laborious challenge of season 1. The idea is it mirrors our world's layout, but it's wrong. Ominous, decaying, covered in that weird, slimy stuff. It wasn't just CGI. It took massive teamwork between physical sets and visual effects to make that shared fantasy, that dark, twisted Hawkins, feel real and tangible, both for the actors and, crucially, for you watching. You had to recognize it, but feel that wrongness instantly.
Yeah, you definitely feel that oppressive atmosphere whenever they're there. Okay, let's talk sound, the music. It's just we're tied to the show's identity now.
Oh, absolutely. The main theme alone is legendary. Kyle Dixon and Michael Stein from the band Survive created it. They actually adapted an unused track they had, and someone on staff suggested making it bigger, bolder, using classic analog synths like the Prophet V, Roland SH2, and the Mellotron.
And that theme just blew up. Didn't it win an Emmy?
It did, for outstanding original main title theme music. And beyond the score, the show just masterfully used period music. You hear the Clash, Toto, New Order, the Bangles, Foreigner, tons of stuff. The music supervisor, Nora Felder, did an amazing job weaving those songs in.
Speaking of the Clash, Should I Stay or Should I Go is basically another character in season 1.
It totally is. It's used in those critical moments, especially Will communicating from the Upside Down. The sources point out how the song's original meaning, usually about romance or whatever, gets this completely new, profound weight in the show. It becomes Will's way to calm himself down and like this heartbreaking signal to Joyce and Jonathan that he's alive, asking if he should stay or try to get back. There's a great little story that Nora Felder had to convince the Clash to let them use it by kind of downplaying the monster stuff and really focusing on the family story at the heart of it.
That's amazing. Sell the heart, not the horror, to get the song. Brilliant.
Exactly. And the score itself by Dixon and Stein, you can hear the influence of composers like John Carpenter and Tangerine Dream. They really leaned into analog synths like the Prophet 6 to absolutely nail that nostalgic 80s electronic sound. They even tied specific songs to characters and moments like Toto's Africa for Steve and Nancy, Corey Hart's Sunglasses at Night when Steve's watching Nancy, or Tangerine Dream's exit during that intense Steve and Jonathan confrontation.
The music really does just pull you right into the era and the mood. Okay, let's dive into the characters themselves. The original Pitch Bible had some pretty clear sketches for the main group.
Yeah, starting with the kids. Mike Wheeler, he's the leader, and notably named after Mikey from the Goonies. Then Lucas Sinclair, initially described as kind of scrawny and loudmouth, the skeptical one. Dustin Henderson, the king geek, brings the humor and is looking for acceptance. And of course, Will Byers, the catalyst, the one who vanishes and gets trapped.
Then the teenagers. Jonathan Byers, quiet, uses his camera a lot, dealing with family stuff. And Nancy Wheeler starts out as the studious, book-smart one, figuring out romance.
Right. And the adults. Jim Hopper, the chief, got a tragic past, initially shown drinking, smoking, almost hedonistic, but he's forced to step up when Will disappears. And Joyce Byers, Will's mom, struggling financially, chain smokes, but fiercely a loving mother. Seen by everyone else as absolutely bonkers because of her frantic search, kind of like the Richard Dreyfuss character in Close Encounters.
Oh, that Close Encounters comparison for Joyce is perfect. It totally captures that intense, almost obsessive focus she has. Now, all the characters grow, but one of the biggest, most talked about arcs in season 1 has got to be Steve Harrington.
Oh, Steve's arc is definitely one of the most intentional transformations. He starts out very much under the influence of his friends Tommy and Carol. Seems pretty shallow, often just a bystander. He goes along with teasing Jonathan, laughs at their crude jokes.
We make some really frustrating choices early on, yeah.
Yeah, and his first big fight with Nancy is telling he's more worried about the party fallout than Barb being missing. Then that key moment where he rips up Jonathan's photos and breaks his camera. The sources note that even then, you see this little flicker of regret, but he still just runs away from it.
Running away seems like his default mode at the start.
It is. And he acts differently around Tommy and Carol, tries to seem cool, but is basically still just standing by while they're being cruel. That peaks when they start slut-shaming Nancy. Steve's nearby, feeling sorry for himself, but doesn't step in. His anger about Nancy and Jonathan leads him to mock Jonathan's family, which finally pushes Jonathan to fight him.
And that fight feels like the literal turning point for him, doesn't it?
The sources actually say Jonathan, quite literally, beats the character development into Steve in that alley fight. Afterwards, when Tommy points out Steve didn't stop them spray painting the movie theater, Steve has that moment and says, "I fucked up." Yeah. And he actually goes back and cleans the paint off the marquee.
So he stops running away.
Exactly. He tries to apologize to Jonathan and Nancy. When he sees Nancy's bandaged hand, those protective instincts, maybe they were always kind of there, they kick in. And then the big test, the Demogorgon fight at the Byers. He's told to leave, and he starts to. But he pauses, sees the lights flickering, that symbol of the danger he avoided, turns back, and saves Jonathan and Nancy. He finally stops being just a bystander. He acts.
That journey is why people latched onto him so much. Thinking about how it all fits, the sources mentioned a 3-act structure for the season.
They did. Act 1 is episodes 1 to 3. Will vanishes, the search starts, 11 escapes, Joyce seems crazy talking to lights. Act 2, episodes 4-6, is when Hawkins gets really haunted. Characters start putting pieces together from different angles. We learn more about 11, and Mike and 11 do the sensory deprivation tank thing to find the upside down. Then Act 3, episodes 7-8, brings everyone together. The big climax, going into the upside down, confronting the monster, saving Will.
And all through that, the show's just drenched in pop culture references, but not just for show, right? They're often part of the plot or characters.
Yeah, the mix is really smooth. The whole plot kid, trapped in another dimension, can still contact family that's straight out of the Twilight Zone's Little Girl Lost and Poltergeist. Joyce's frantic search with the lights, that's a direct echo of Richard Dreyfuss in Close Encounters. Mike and Eleven's relationship definitely pulls from E.T. and Elliot, and also Oscar and Eli from Let the Right One In, which is even cooler because they cast Cara Buono, Mike's mom, who was also the mom in the American remake Let Me In.
Whoa, that's a great casting connection. And Eleven's powers.
Her telekinesis, especially how she uses it against bullies or cruelty, that's got strong vibes from Stephen King's Firestarter and Carrie. Joyce chopping at the wall with an axe, total shining nod. The Demogorgon pushing through the wall, classic Freddy Krueger in A Nightmare on Elm Street. And the monster design itself borrows from Alien, but the overall vibe pulls from Lovecraft, Giger, Del Toro, even Junji Ito, masters of the grotesque.
It really is like a masterclass in using influences without just copying. Any other cool, specific episode details jump out from the sources?
For Chapter 1, the vanishing of Will Byers, there's a great note. The very first scene they wrote and shot was the kids playing D&D. The Duffers said the actors just clicked instantly. And they really emphasized Winona Ryder's performance in that first episode, how incredible she was carrying so much weight, often alone.
That D&D scene sets them up perfectly.
Chapter 4, The Body. This title is a deliberate nod to the Stephen King story that became Stand By Me. For Chapter 6, The Monster. The sources mention again how much the Duffers dreamed of doing a real physical monster with practical effects. They pushed the artist to make it really weird. There's that funny story about telling toddlers on set the monster was from Monsters, Inc., so they wouldn't freak out.
Oh, that's perfect. Smart move.
In Chapter 7, The Bathtub, the Duffers apparently described this one as bonkers and the most purely fun. It's where all the storylines finally smash together and the characters team up for that crazy makeshift sensory deprivation tank scene. It's the big payoff.
Yeah, it's the moment the team you've been rooting for finally comes together. And beyond specific plots, even the general tone and setting had references baked in.
Oh, totally. The Indiana setting itself nods to the movie Breaking Away. The focus on characters and relationships takes cues from shows like Friday Night Lights and Freaks and Geeks. Even stuff like the posters on the kids' walls, The Evil Dead, The Dark Crystal, those were deliberate choices. And shots of the Byers house were meant to echo the cabin in The Evil Dead. The level of detail is just nuts.
It really feels like every single frame has something for fans of that era. Okay, let's wrap up with the reception and legacy of Season 1. It was huge, right out of the gate.
Oh yeah, critics loved it. Overwhelmingly positive reviews. They talked about the mix of originality and homage, the great characters, the perfect tone, the look of it, and especially the acting writer, Harbour, Wolfhard, Brown, Modine. It got called stuff like astoundingly efficient storytelling, how it felt like a complete movie in 8 hours, but balanced the monsters with really human themes of love and fealty.
It did feel really satisfying, not just like set up.
And it had this immediate cultural impact beyond just TV reviews. 11 loving egos. That actually caused a noticeable spike in demand for Kellogg's, led to tie-ins later. And of course, the whole #JusticeForBarb thing went viral. That online campaign showed how much even a minor character connected, and Shannon Purser actually got an Emmy nomination for it.
#JusticeForBarb was everywhere. It really showed how invested people got, even in the smaller parts.
Definitely. And the season cleaned up at awards shows, too. Won the Screen Actors Guild Award for the ensemble cast, the Emmy for the theme music we talked about, plus Emmys for editing, sound editing, title design, casting. It also got the Producers Guild of America Award for drama TV, just recognized all over the place.
Massive success by any standard, and it launched a whole phenomenon.
It sure did.
And that's our journey through the Upside Down, or at least Season 1 of Stranger Things. If you had fun geeking out with us, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and share roll credits with your fellow binge watchers. We'll be back soon with more trivia, more TV deep dives, and probably more bad impressions of Hopper. Until then, stay strange.